What's going on, people? In this video, I'll be breaking down the entire first half of Attack on Titan Season 4 in about 20 minutes or less, and by the end you'll understand what the stakes are going into Part 2. To make things flow easier, I'll be explaining the timeline in chronological order, so you can more easily see how the arrival of the volunteers directly led to Eren infiltrating another country and starting a civil war when he arrived back home. In case you're wondering, there won't be any spoilers for part 2 of the final season in this video, as I'm only going to be talking about things that were revealed in the first 16 episodes, so as long as you've seen those, which I'm assuming you have, then nothing in here is a spoiler. Before we get into it though, I'd really appreciate if you hit that sub button, as I do explainer content, what if videos, and other random stuff that you'll likely be interested in if you're watching this. Okay, so following the end of Attack on Titan Season 3, the Survey Corps' victory against the Warriors caused shockwaves around the world, with other countries finding out that Marley had lost the colossal and female titans. The Marleyan Empire already had a ton of enemies before this, so now that they'd been weakened by the scouts, some of those enemies saw this as a great opportunity. The story goes that nations in the Middle East instantly formed an alliance to try and take Marley down, and in the year 850 this would be the start of a brand new war. Moving on to the year 851, Marley sent a small fleet of survey ships to gather intel on Paradis, because they didn't have time to launch a serious invasion with everything going on. Within hours of approaching the shore, the entire fleet had been ambushed by the attack titan and the rest of the scouts, who'd been expecting Marley's return for the past year. As the new commander of the Survey Corps, Hange was excited to use this visit from Marley as a chance to learn more about the outside world, and luckily for her, there were two soldiers happy to tell her anything she wanted to know. The soldiers I'm referring to are Yelena and Onyankopon, who were both forced to join the Marleyan army after their home countries were invaded. As a result, they had no loyalty to the Empire whatsoever, and a few years ago, Yelena founded a small resistance group known as the anti-Marlyean volunteers. According to her, the goal of these volunteers is to free the Eldian people from Marley's oppression, but the real plot twist here is that they were being secretly supported by Zeke Jager. Yelena revealed to Hange that Zeke has a plan to guarantee the safety of Paradis from outside forces, and all he's asking for in return is that they accept him onto the island and introduce him to Eren. When this proposal was brought to the military, almost no one took it seriously, as they had zero reasons to trust the Beast Titan after everything he'd done. Despite that, it was Eren himself who suggested that Zeke's secret plan might be legit, because the Yeager brothers knew something that no one else did. A year ago, Eren realized that if his founding titan makes contact with a titan of royal blood, it allows him to activate the founder's full potential. That full potential could be used to unleash all the titans currently trapped within the walls of Paradis, and trample any nation who would try to attack them. This becomes possible if Zeke's royal-blooded beast titan is allowed to make contact with Eren, and in the process it would guarantee the island's safety. After hearing all this, Hange understood that Zeke's proposal to meet Eren might be real, but no decision was made on when or if they'd bring him inside the walls. Instead, the new focus became protecting themselves from the survey ships which Marley kept on sending for years, and it was Yelena who helped them to solve this issue. By using her wireless radio, she would lure ships towards the shore, at which point they'd be ambushed by the colossal or attack titans. Each time this happened, nearly all Marleyan soldiers on board would be locked up in a prison, because the vast majority of them hated Eldians and didn't want to join the volunteers. Over the next few months, Yelena and Onyankopon started to assist the island in different ways, like when they proposed the idea of building a port. This was the first major step in turning Paradis into a modern nation, and during construction, the tension between certain prisoners and Eldians began to decrease, with a quick example being how Chef Niccolo started to like Sasha. What this proved was that Marleyans and Eldians could get along if they got to know each other, and Armin thought that this was a sign that they could talk things out with their enemies. On the other hand, Eren thought that there wasn't enough time to try and take this peaceful approach, and he believed that they needed to do something to let people know they can't be messed with. In the year 852, the port was finally complete, with the island welcoming its first foreign visitors from the nation of Hizuru. Hizuru is a country in Asia that used to be friendly with Eldians around 100 years ago, and after meeting with Zeke in secret, they agreed to make this trip. On her arrival, Ambassador Kiyomi revealed the full details of Zeke's plan to save Paradis, which he hoped would get him brought there as soon as possible. Step 1 of the plan was that the Yeager brothers would activate a small-scale rumbling, which would warn the rest of the world to stay away from the island. Step 2 of the plan was that Hizuru would spend the next 50 years modernizing Paradis, so that in the future they won't have to rely on the rumbling to survive. The third and final step was that until this modernization is complete, Paradis must always have a founding titan and a titan of royal blood, so they can still defend themselves with the rumbling if they have to. On the face of it, that plan didn't sound too bad, but the final step is what Eren didn't like, because it meant that Historia and her royal blood would need to inherit the Beast Titan after Zeke's time is done. Only then would they consistently maintain having a Titan of royal blood, And of course, in the future, Historia's descendants would also need to inherit the beast for that same reason. Although she personally seemed willing to make this sacrifice, Eren point blank refused to let it happen, and this wasn't the first time that he's protected her in this way. Back in Season 3, when he realized how to activate the Founder, he didn't tell anyone because he wanted to avoid pretty much this exact situation where she might be turned into a royal-blooded titan. Because of this, Eren rejected Zeke's plan, and now believed that they had to explore other options besides the rumbling. Just before we continue, it's worth mentioning that Kiyomi is only here since Zeke promised her access to a valuable natural resource on Paradis called the Iceberg Stone, and this would make Hizuru incredibly rich if they were to gain access to it. Another reason they came was to see Mikasa, who is a descendant of their nation's ruling family, but as cool as that sounds, their main priority is still the financial benefits that come with having the Iceberg Stone. Flashing forward to the year 853, the scouts were still desperately searching for an alternative to Zeke's plan, so that Historia wouldn't need to inherit the Beast Titan. As a last-ditch attempt to avoid following Zeke's proposal, Hange suggested that maybe the scouts should physically go to Marley themselves so they can understand the enemy, and hopefully this could be the beginning of a path to peace. I should remind you guys that at this point in the timeline, the Beast Titan had less than 2 years to live due to the Curse of Ymir, so if Paradis kept on wasting time, then they lose their chance to activate the Founding Titan. This is why later that same year, before the scouts went to Marley, Yelena convinced Flock to organize a meeting between her and Eren. Up until now, the volunteers weren't allowed to talk to Eren for security reasons, but with Zeke's time running out, it was a chance she was willing to take. In this meeting, Yelena revealed something to Eren that none of the other volunteers knew, which is that the eldest Yeager brother doesn't actually want to save the Eldian race. The reality is that Zeke's real plan ever since he was a teenager was to find the Founding Titan and use that power to sterilize all Eldians. If Eldians can't reproduce, then the power of the Titans will peacefully die out, creating a world where no more humans have to live in fear of the Titans, and no more Eldians have to suffer. In that way, humanity could be saved without the need for war between Marley and Paradis, but it's only possible if the person possessing the Founding Titan agrees to do this. I should also mention that Zeke's true plan does still involve doing a small-scale rumbling, because that way the rest of the world will be too afraid to attack the island, allowing the Eldians there to peacefully die of natural causes. While the anime didn't show us Eren's immediate reaction to being told all of this, we did see that later in the timeline, he personally agrees to help Zeke with the euthanization plan. Anyway, moving on to the year 854, Marley finally won their war in the Middle East after 4 long years, with the Beast Titan wiping out the remaining enemy ships. During this battle, so many Eldians were casually sacrificed by the Marleyan army, whether that be by using them as pure titans or as disposable soldiers. I mean, they literally had a suicide squad. This kind of suffering is a thing the Eldians would no longer have to go through if Zeke's dream becomes a reality, which is why in the first episode, he remarks how war is a terrible thing. In the following days after this fight, a lot of things happened, as the Marleyan general was unhappy with the way the war played out. On at least 2 occasions, the armored and beast titans were dangerously close to being killed in battle, proving that the power of the titans is starting to be surpassed by technology. In response to this, Zeke suggested that they should once again go to Paradis to try and steal the Founder, as having the absolute power of all 9 shifters would give Marley enough time to upgrade their technology to the level of other nations. This suggestion was of course just part of Zeke's plans to be reunited with his brother, but as it turns out, Eren wasn't too far away. In episode 2 of the final season, we see that Eren had infiltrated the Marleyan army without permission and was in the Middle East observing Reiner from a distance. He watches on as Reiner interacts with Gabi and Falco, who were 2 candidates to be the next Armored Titan, and after seeing this relationship, Eren decides to manipulate Falco when they all return back to Marley. Over the next few weeks, he earns the boy's trust by giving him a lot of friendly advice, and in return, Falco uses his position as a warrior candidate to go outside the internment zone and send letters on Eren's behalf. Due to this, Eren could send highly sensitive information to whoever he wanted, and my personal theory is that every letter he sent was addressed to Hizuru's embassy, and from there Kiyomi would just pass the message on to the relevant person. That would explain how Eren was able to tell Zeke where he was hiding in Marley, with the 2 brothers then coming face to face for only the 2nd time. As I mentioned earlier, it wasn't long until they agreed to use their power to sterilize the Eldian race, but crucially, the Beast Titan didn't want to do it until after they got back to the island. In terms of how they actually get back there, this is where the declaration of war comes in. For various political reasons, it was a good thing for Marley to have this event before they invaded Paradis, with Willy tybur using his connections to invite diplomats and journalists from around the world. In reality, what this did was give Eren the perfect chance to hurt multiple countries at once, and he sent letters to the scouts making it clear that he was going to attack during the declaration regardless of whether they helped him or not. This was a genius move from Eren because it created a situation where the Survey Corps had no choice but to help him, because if they didn't help him, then the chances are Eren would be killed and the rest of the world would likely wipe out the island as revenge for what he did. That's why in the end the scouts swooped in to save both Yeager brothers, because only these two together had the power to stop the armies of the world, who as I mentioned would want revenge. Now, before we move on to everything that happened after the declaration of war, it's worth highlighting the 4 main points that came out of this battle. Point number 1 is that Eren wiped out all of Marley's top military officials, which was done on purpose to delay the amount of time that it would take them to get revenge on the island. For that same reason, Armin also destroyed the port, because with so many of Marley's ships destroyed, it would take them months to reorganize their military. Point number 2 is that Eren managed to steal the Warhammer Titan from Lara Tybur, and this was a big deal as he'd need to use its abilities later in the timeline. Point number 3 is that Gabi killed Sasha after sneaking aboard the airship the scouts were using to escape, and together with Falco, the warrior candidates were unexpectedly brought back to Paradis Island. Finally, point number 4 is that Zeke tried to fake his own death, and this was important because if Marley realized that he had betrayed them, then there was no telling what they would do in response. On their arrival back to the island, the Yeager brothers were immediately separated, with Eren being put in jail as punishment for going rogue in Marley without permission, and Zeke was put under Levi's supervision in this giant forest. Considering everything that happened, the government on Paradis could no longer trust Eren and believed he might be under his brother's control, which is why Zachary began looking for new candidates to inherit the founding Titan. The volunteers who had helped the island for the past 3 years were then placed under house arrest by Pixis, because if you remember they had very close ties to Zeke, and at the same time, Gabi and Falco were locked up as prisoners of war. As a side note, the military police had been planning for months for Historia to eat Zeke as soon as he arrived on the island. However, the reason this didn't happen is because the queen had now become pregnant. Her pregnancy made it too risky for her to be titanized as nobody knew what would happen to the baby, and as a consequence, it meant that Zeke had to be kept alive until after she gave birth. This is why they put him under Levi's supervision, because if it wasn't for Historia's pregnancy, Zeke would have already been eaten. Briefly switching back over to the other side of the ocean, despite Zeke's best efforts to fake his death, Marley realized that he had betrayed them, and the decision was made to join forces with armies from around the world to wipe Paradis off the face of the earth. This new global alliance of armies would launch their attack in 6 months' time, as the Marleyan army by itself was currently too weak to do anything. Despite that, Reiner insisted that they couldn't wait half a year to form this global alliance, and instead, he convinced General Magath that the warriors should ambush the island in only 1 month's time. Over the next few weeks, the politics on Paradis started to become a lot more complicated, with the emergence of a rebel faction known as the Yeagerists. In the early stages, this group was led by Flock, and their main aim was to bring the 2 Yeager brothers into contact so they could activate the rumbling and secure the future of the island. To achieve this goal, they did several things, starting with leaking information to the public about how Eren had been imprisoned. When the people found out about this, it caused protests across the country, as ordinary civilians couldn't understand why their hero was being held hostage by the military. This leak caused support for the Yeagerist movement to grow among the population, and soon afterwards, Flock and his team of leakers were all sent to jail. The second major thing the Yeagerists did was plant a bomb to assassinate Zachary, who was the highest ranking military officer on Paradis. Like I said earlier, Zachary was actively searching for candidates to replace Eren as the founding Titan, which is precisely the reason why the rebels decided to get rid of him. Later that same day after Zachary was killed, Flock and his comrades were then secretly released from jail by other Yeagerists who worked as prison guards, and they met up with Eren, who'd escaped from prison himself using the power of his Warhammer Titan. Together, their goal was now to find Zeke, and to accomplish this, they intended to kidnap someone who knew his location. Commander Hange was one of the few people aware of where Zeke was being held, and it wasn't long until she was ambushed by the rebels and forced at gunpoint by Flock to take him to the Beast Titan. Speaking of the Beast Titan, for about a month he'd been under the watchful eye of Captain Levi and 30 other soldiers, meaning it was virtually impossible for him to try and escape, or at least it would have been if Zeke didn't already have a plan. 3 years ago, when the first survey ships arrived, he loaded these ships with crates of wine that were contaminated with his spinal fluid. It was Yelena's mission to make sure the wine was consumed by as many high-ranking officers as possible, and over the years this wine actually became famous on the island, with many soldiers showing an interest in trying it. What nobody else knew was that the wine was tainted, meaning that one scream from Zeke would turn any Eldian who drank it into a pure Titan. Unfortunately for the 30 soldiers watching over him, they'd been drinking it ever since they arrived in the forest, as it was given to them by new Survey Corps recruits who were secretly Yeagers in disguise. As a result, Zeke was just patiently waiting for the day that he and Eren agreed to meet, and once that day came, he screamed at the top of his lungs, titanizing every soldier around him except for the captain. Up until now, he boldly assumed that Levi wouldn't be able to kill 30 of his own men. However, when it came down to it, he dealt with them pretty quickly and soon started chasing after Zeke himself. During their fight, the eldest Yeager brother was forced to transform into his beast titan, and after a brief struggle, he was blown out of his titan body by thunder spears. As much as Levi wanted to kill him in this moment to get revenge for his comrades and obviously Eren as well, he knew he couldn't do it because if he did, then it would all but guarantee they'd lose the power of the beast titan. For that reason, he began transporting Zeke's body back to the walls and tied the guy to a thunder spear to make sure he wouldn't move. Regardless of that, Zeke still decided to take his chances, and by moving his neck, he detonated the spear, blowing up himself, Levi, and this innocent horse in the process. The sound of this blast was heard by Flock and Hange, who were on their way to the forest, and after hearing this noise, Flock decided to change direction so they could go and investigate. Meanwhile, as Zeke was close to death, a vision of a young girl appeared to him, and he was soon approached by one of the pure titans he had created earlier. This titan then unusually ripped open its own stomach and put what was left of Zeke's body inside, making this the last time we saw him for the first half of the season. Switching back to what was happening inside the walls, Falco and Gabby were on the run after escaping from prison, but were eventually given a place to stay by a nice family in the countryside. In a strange twist of fate, this turned out to be Sasha's family, aka the person who Gabby had killed on the airship, but for now nobody realized that connection. Sasha's adopted sister Kaya was the only person who knew Falco and Gabby were from Marley, and she tried to help them get back home by introducing them to Niccolo. I briefly mentioned this earlier, but Niccolo was a Marleyan chef who had a huge crush on Sasha, and after her death he invited her family to come and taste his food. When they eventually went to the restaurant, Kaya made sure to bring the two warrior candidates so they could meet him. However, things took a dark turn when Niccolo realized that Gabby was the warrior candidate from the airship. In the scuffle that followed, a drop of Zeke's tainted wine entered Falco's mouth, meaning that if the Beast Titan was to scream anywhere near him, he would be turned into a pure Titan. As if this wasn't enough, Sasha's family were then told that Gabby was the one who killed their daughter, and Mikasa and Armin took her into a different room to de-escalate the situation. This is when one of my favourite moments in the entire season happened, because Eren, who had not long escaped from prison, just casually walks into the room to have a chat with his childhood friends. During the following conversation, he just spent time roasting them both for having no free will, as he claimed that Mikasa only protects him due to her Ackerman programming, while Armin is being controlled by the memories he inherited from Bertolt. From the language he was using, it was clear from the beginning that he was trying to upset them, and later on, Jean suggests that there might have been some hidden meaning behind it. Anyhow, after Eren beats Armin to a pulp, he then gets his soldiers to arrest everyone in the restaurant, including Sasha's family, and they're all taken to Shiganshina to be imprisoned. By this point in time, the Yeagerists now have full control over the military, as all the high-ranking officials had to surrender after finding out that they'd been poisoned by Zeke's spinal fluid. Until this moment, Pixis had actually been plotting to steal the Founding Titan from Eren to stop the Yeagerists from rising, but when the wine situation was revealed, high-ranking soldiers began to defect to the Yeagerists to avoid being titanized. This left him with literally no other option but to surrender, and so Pixis gave up and agreed to all the demands the Yeagerists were making. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Reiner had convinced Marley to launch a quick surprise attack on Paradis, and in the lead up to this attack, Pieck and Porco snuck inside the walls. We know they used Pieck's cart titan to get there because it was implied that her footprints were discovered, leading to Eren realizing that there were spies on the island. That's why in this scene he wanted Gabby to help him find the undercover warriors, but before he could finish his proposal, Pieck shows up out of nowhere and stabs a nearby guard. It's important to realize that in this moment her mission is not to kill Eren, but rather her orders were to lure him to a location where the Founding Titan could be eaten. For that reason, she attempted to earn his trust by pretending she was defecting from Marley, and she offered to show Eren where her comrades were hiding. Naturally, he had no real grounds to believe anything she was saying, but because he was now in control of the situation, he at least allowed Pieck the chance to point out where Porco and Reiner might be hiding. What Eren didn't know was that Porco was already in the building disguised as a member of the Scouts, bringing us to the final spectacle from the first half of the season. With Eren on the roof, the Jaw Titan burst out from underneath to try and eat the Founding Titan, and if he had succeeded, then Marley would have won right there and then. Luckily for Eren, only his legs got bitten off, so he was able to use that injury as the catalyst for his transformation. The lightning and smoke alerted nearby Marleyan airships to his location, and on board these ships were Reiner, General Magath, and also Falco's older brother. I didn't really find time to mention Colt in the video until now, but like I said, he's Falco's older brother and was the warrior candidate selected by Marley to be the next Beast Titan. Well, until Zeke betrayed them. Anyway people, if you enjoyed this recap, then I'd appreciate if you hit that sub button, as I plan to be doing episode breakdowns for part 2 of the final season, and if you're feeling generous, then do be sure to smash that like button as well. Thanks for watching as always, and until the next one, peace out.